Heidi, I mean, in the business you're in, Ag United, that kind of the name says a lot there. I'd appreciate your thoughts or observations.
Well, and I'm going to kind of back up to the original question first. And this is not trying to be negative because we're looking for opportunities, but I just kind of, you had production, and I kind of, if you're going to think about the state of where we are right now, production agriculture is complex. There's a lot going on, from dairy to pork to poultry, whatever it is. They all have a lot of different inputs and a little bit different ways of outputs. But production agriculture is complex. Food processing is messy. Distribution is broken. Consumption is shifting, and disposal is too high. We look at food waste, and something that a lot of people don't really think about, but I think, what is it, 40% of food that's purchased is wasted after the fact. So I guess trying to take those things and look at opportunities, the biggest thing I see is just what you were saying. It's like everybody needs to sit down and just have a conversation. It's that communication, and it's doing things like what we're doing right now that helps to start that at the very basic level of our ag groups and who we represent in South Dakota.
Thank you. Well said. Bonnie, your thoughts?
Yes, I guess that there have been so many good things said here, and we too, I think, just really believe that communication between all the groups would be helpful, and a way to, do that is always interesting and takes time and all that, but having some sort of an event that we can learn what's going on in the other groups and try to work together sounds like a good idea. The South Dakota Ag Foundation did a major outreach, a year or so ago, and tried to put a video together to try to unite a lot of the groups to give a unified message, if you will. And several of us have been a part of that, and that was maybe the start of trying to get people to have a commonality, I guess you might say. So I think too, this communication between all of us is important, and we need to make an effort to do that, and pulling in other people, like you said, maybe it's, truck drivers and all kinds of people that are in the food chain. We need to involve everybody and get us on the same page, at least to some extent. Because everybody has ideas, and this would be a good way to share. So
thank you. Heidi, I want to go back to your comment a little bit. You addressed each one of those chains or those links in the supply chain and issues with all of them, which I think is totally fair. Where you folks are involved in, I'll say it, all aspects, or all, the different, whether it's beef, pork, dairy, soybeans, corn, are those same challenges prevalent in every one of those commodities?
I think so, on different levels. Some of them may struggle more in one area than others, because if I take poultry, for example, if they go through Dakota layers, they are in more control of their end product than a beef producer who's sending their cattle through the sale barn. Dairy producers, they obviously are at the mercy of their milk marketing, whoever they sell their milk to. They are married to that company or that cooperative, whoever it is, because the milk market is tight enough that you don't just decide that we're going to go shop around, see if we can find a better milk price from a different organization. The milk market's tight. You get what you signed up for, and hopefully, so much of it, we know how the price fluctuates. The other thing with poultry too would be like your turkey processing. We got Dakota Provisions, so they have some control over what goes into that, but a lot of it is the open market. And I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, because I have a tendency to ramble and things swirl around in there. So if I didn't answer it, please redirect me. But I think it's a little bit different
So
for
where
each
you see maybe,
organization.
go ahead.
No, and that's fine. I just, it's a little bit different and on each different stage of the food chain, because it's just like when Smithfield shut down during COVID, you know, dairy was in a similar situation. They were dumping milk because they couldn't get it through the plants. It was a different reason. They had, they had people to work. They didn't have containers, or they didn't have the right size containers. So it was different reasons. It's just like now with our distribution, some of it is we can't get containers. I mean, some of it, there's a milk processing plant that broke down in Colorado, and it supplies all the fluid milk for the area. So schools didn't have milk for like 2 days because they needed a part. I mean, so I really went a long ways on that. So like I said,
No, I
different, similar problems in different situations.
do you, just to go back to that a bit, do you see any one commodity that, you know, the bottlenecks between production and processing, distribution, maybe have a better handle on it? And you go, man, if this other commodity could do similar things, that would be a big win. Or is it just enough different by the nature of the commodity itself that it just kind of is what it is? Or I don't know if that's a very well asked question. Sorry.
And I don't know that I have a good answer for that question, because I'm not in tune with all of the different organizations well enough to really answer well. You know, I know the basics of that I did see different problems for different reasons, but I don't know that I have a good answer for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that as we sit here today, that we would all somewhat agree that it's bottlenecks in the various things along the supply chain that cause us the consternation? I mean, is that what it comes down to? Is that, I mean, it's a complex issue. It's not that simple. We're not going to solve it in a half hour, but I'm just curious what you folks think from your chairs. And I don't everybody answer at once. Glenn, thank you.
Well, I think, you know, the thing is that we really haven't touched on, but we're in a global market. And I'll just take our industry, for instance. We export about 27-28% of our product outside of the country. And I think you look at the different commodity groups, they're all in different scenarios. Heidi touched on it very well in that the poultry has more control. The downside of that is they're very vertically integrated, be that up or downside, I shouldn't say, but that's the reason why they have such good control, because they control the product all the way basically to the consumer. So we still have that competitive market out here. Like James mentioned, it becomes more difficult. And I think, in all honesty, beef will probably be one of the last entities that gets vertically integrated to the extent some of the other commodities are, but that's created some real issues. I think each commodity group is unique in what their demand is and how they handle that, and where their end product evolves or ends up. You know, I know the grain sector, I don't know if Bonnie wants to touch on that, but I know they're also dependent on the export market, particularly export out of the state. And so I think, I do think every commodity group is unique, just depending on what the status of their industry is and what the ability is to utilize their product in state or in the country, for that matter.
Those are good comments. And you know what, one size doesn't necessarily fit all. We've all you know, have different challenges. I tend to agree with you, Glenn, that you know, the cattle, for a lot of reasons, are going to be probably the last to be, you know, consolidated. And I don't know whether that's the consolidation seems like a bad thing to me, but you know, maybe it isn't. I don't know. There's some challenges in how, you know, livestock simply are raised, or cattle, beef cattle, you know, versus maybe some of the other commodities. Judge, as you travel around talking to people, what kind of feedback are you getting as far as their challenges, maybe by different commodities, if you will?
Well, I would say keeping grass, and part of it has to do with the taxation, and I'm not casting stones, but the just keeping economic incentives, even in our area, and
We're having a little trouble with your reception, Judge.
in Casey, go west of Fort Pierre, you know what I'm talking about. That shouldn't have been the same problems 40 years ago with that thing going on, which goes back to water quantity, water quality, and that type of thing. So that's probably, my people's challenge is grass, keeping grass, and part of keeping it profitable is the tax structure, right, wrong, or otherwise, and I don't want to get into that. But I don't have any more comments to add, but I do like the comment of the not profit, but economic activity.
Yeah.
I really like that, because if Glenn isn't there, raising hogs and buying grain locally or whatever, you know, there's no reason for the tire shop to be in town, or one less reason for the tire shop, fuel guy, all that economic activities. Just because it's there and one person is, yeah, you might make him some money on a turn on hogs, but he's also, if the money isn't there to circulate, there's not a chance for anybody to get a hold of that money. And that's a message I would like to see, and it needs to be tuned on, but I like that message.
Well, and I think that's a great point, and I can remember a few different times being tasked with being on a, economic development type committee in a few small towns, and they're trying to find the secret sauce. For a while it was building buildings and trying to encourage some kind of a industry to come in and occupy that building, and they would rent them, and I guess my contention has always been is, let agriculture be profitable, and they'll spend money around town, and those other businesses will grow and support those profitable ag businesses. And we see it, right? We see it when our producers, when they're profitable, they expand, they buy new things, they do different things, and they know how to shut it down when they're not. So I too, I like the economic activity. That I think doesn't sound like as dirty a word maybe as profits sound like sometimes. So thank you for that. I guess, if we were all just to be challenged today and go, okay, I'm gonna go back to James and say, okay, James, now what you're challenged with is you get to sit down with, in your instance, the Packers, and go, we're going to try and get our heads together here. What could we find for some common ground? And, how could we kind of pull back, sit down our sword, so to speak? And are there opportunities to work together? What would that conversation look like for you?
Well, that's a great question. And that was something I, kind of wanted to go back to. Many of us on here have been on a number of these, collaborations, Ag Unity, lots of different promotional efforts. And, the one thing I can say there is it's oftentimes the production ag. It's, as was alluded to earlier, it excludes, and not, purposefully, but it's just the way it's been. The ag businesses, any people all along that chain, the team that's involved. And from our industry, yeah, we might have the cow calf guys and the feeders, but when you get above that, we don't have that. We don't get the opportunity. I'd love to sit down, in one of these meetings, see how we can all work together. But unless, the big retailers and somebody from them big meat packers is there, it really doesn't matter. And so, I would say, specifically within the beef industry, there's profit, there's demand. People want our product. They're willing to pay their good American hard-earned money for our product.